So here we go. We've got a problem with the charging connector on this Samsung notebook PC, which is I think we're going to see it there. It's RV-510, and it's got a problem with this little thing here, this little mains adapter DC power input. Possibly see there, there's no real click when it goes in there, so there's nothing to retain it. It's obviously got very loose, and that's a problem. So I've had this thing apart once and resoldered the connector onto the motherboard because it was coming adrift. Actually, it had got a dry joint on the centre pin and it was fizzling and rather burnt. So I made that good, but it's clearly not enough. Now, this is a replacement component here, replacement connector. And if I mate the cable into there, there's a definite positive retention there, which sounds good. Yeah, that will be good if we can put this in. So taking this to bits is a nightmare. Well, I say there's no such thing as nightmares, just little problems to get over. Apologies about the state of the laptop, looks okay to me. So here we go, we've done this before. We've got to start on the back of the thing, and there are millions, well, that's exaggerating, a significant number of screws to take out. There we are, that's the battery. I have already had this thing apart once, so I've got a little sheet there which I'm going to use to put the various fixings on. Now I'm just going to throughout, I shall just use this little multi screwdriver, very useful little thing. It's got multiple ends there, but this one seems to do the job. So let's get going. Right, so in this speeded up section, taking off the hard disk drive cover, which is a bit fiddly. There are two very small screws there, and then the memory cover. Now I'm going to start on the general screws through the rear cover, and there are lots of these. Just keep going, there's always one that you haven't seen when you come to try and take it apart. All of these screws here are the same size, which is one small mercy, I guess. Keep finding them. Put them all to one side. Now the hard drive. It turns out you don't need to undo the screws that go through that little metal clip. Just the two that hold it, the whole thing onto the computer. Then it slides back and pulls out the way. Now I think I've probably got all of those screws. No, one more. There we go. Got a suspicion that there was some Yeah, some screws under here, one here. And the other one, oh no, that's it, the one's under there, but this has come out so that can go out the way there. Now that pulls out because I've already taken out a screw that holds the back end of that DVD drive in. Really fine flat things. So we'll start prising this off. I seem to recall bits at the back came off easier. Yeah. Actually, having been open once, I suspect this is more likely to pop apart than it was before. I don't know whether I'm breaking any of these lugs, but I hope not. And there we are. Now, I can see, but I don't think you'll be able to, so I'm going to move the camera and I'll just get a different position. What I've got to do is to separate this part here from this part here. Now the main chassis is connected to this main back board, but we've got flying leads, you can just see, going to various things. There's one connector down here which we need to encourage away. There we are. The mouse pad is on one of these connectors that you have to, first of all, find a right tool. That'll do. One of these connectors where you have to bring the little clamp forward to loosen it off. Get in there. This is a regal pain in the butt. Come up there. Can I get in? Yes. I think that will come free now. Now the next pain is the, there we are, that's the keyboard ribbon. Now that, so they're both these kind of really fine ribbon style connectors, very thin printed board connectors, but held with different type clamps. Let's see if I can just show those so we can see. This here is a thing for the keyboard connector, so that's a flappy downy thing, whereas this thing is a pulley outy thing. There we go. Don't know why they're different, but they are. So we've got screws here, here. This thing comes off with it, if I recall rightly. There. Mainly this here, because this whole fan's going to come off with the motherboard because it's linked to this copper heat pipe which goes to the processor down here underneath. So I'm going to pull this out first of all. Why are these connectors all different styles? It's bizarre, isn't it? Let's get the thing out there. Funny that came out easier last time. There we are. So that's obviously connecting up the display. Then we've got to have that out. There we go, one there. Right, can't see anything else, so let's just work around the screws. So we are One thing that will fall out is that, which looks like a bung that's masking an HDMI socket. Now what's just pulled off there are the two antenna leads for the Wi-Fi that are going. Normally some kind of patch antenna up in the back panel somewhere. So there we are, that's the inside of the unit, a bit dusty. Might try and brush that out before we put it back together again. Looks like it's sort of copper flashed on the plastic to give it a bit of RF sealing, and there we are. So next thing to do is look at the board, the circuit board itself. So there's the offending article there. Just make sure it does look like that, and I think mercifully it does this time. The previous one didn't look quite like that, so I'll look at the other underside of it. So there's the underside of it. Now you can see I've already tried to reflux this inner pin, which comes out again. Let's look at the replacement. Put it side by side. You can see that's the inner pin, and that had gone dry joint here, was fizzling, so I've cleaned some of this conformal coating off and just try to wet it across there. But the whole problem is that the internal pins have just lost the spring and are not holding the connector, the power plug from the DC power supply. So this has definitely got to come out and go. So you'll bear with me while I do a little bit of desoldering and resoldering. I think we'll work up here. I'm using desoldering wick there for the centre pin. That worked fine, but wasn't so good on the other pins. Decided to just chop the connector out rather than try and sweat out the solder from all the joints there. Obviously it's going to be thrown away anyway. Cleaning these things out as carefully as possible, but there's always a danger that you cause damage with a solder sucker. In fact, some of these little tangs are so tough I had to pull them out with these little cutters. There we are, that's gone. And everything all cleaned up and ready for the new connector now. I'm just hoping that the through plating will help flux this stuff too. This is the real concern. This main power pin only protrudes a tiny gnat's. Right. Just flux him in. Well, I can't say I'm particularly proud of my soldering here, but I think it'll do the job. And of course, when all these are done, then I simply get a multimeter and check continuity between the various contacts of the connector and the circuit board. Okay, that feels a little bit better. I'll just demonstrate that. That's certainly something constraining it there. Add another little speeded up section. I'm brushing out the dust from the lower part of the case and then popping in the board and making sure that HDMI rubber bung is still in there. then you'll see a different shot here. This is because I actually assembled the whole thing and realised that I'd forgotten to connect the little white connector on the right. So this is the second go at it. Very frustrating. And putting the keyboard and mousepad connections back in again is a real trial of patience. This is just the very final throes of getting it right eventually. This took a long time, a lot longer than you see here. But there we are, it's all ready to be clicked back into place. Hard drive back in. And then battery pack in. Nothing's gone bang at this stage, which is rewarding. So having got the hard disk drive back in again, I'm going to run the machine up just to check that it functions before I put all the screws back in the back panel. Certainly seems to spark up. And I've also checked that the keyboard and the mouse pad work. So now it's a case of putting everything back together again. I was quite pleased when I got this all back together again that there wasn't a single spare screw that I'd forgotten to put in, and I wasn't short of any. And there we are, all back together again. And now it's a matter of just clicking the front and back parts of the case together and checking the power connector. Nice positive fit this time. And running up Windows. There we are, it's working, but that was a pretty long-winded exercise for one tiny little connector.